Psalm 87, a psalm that celebrates the city of God and the people of God. On the holy mount stands the city God founded. Yahweh loves the gates of Zion. You get that sense right from the beginning that the city of Jerusalem, Zion, is going to be celebrated in this psalm. This is not just a city that God favours. This is God's city. In the language of the Old Testament, when the people are taken away into captivity, God is described as leaving the temple and leaving the city. Somehow the very presence of God has departed. Because this is God's dwelling place. Certainly this is the place where God is worshipped and celebrated, and Zion is God's city. It wasn't always that way. As far as we can tell in the Old Testament, it's in the time of King David that Zion, Jerusalem, becomes the capital of the nation and therefore the heart of the people's worship. But the city has continued to have this focal point for people of many faiths, Christians, Jews, Muslims, as we see this as a place where God's presence is encountered and experienced in a way that's difficult to describe and yet still draws us. I think the reason given is not simply that this is somehow a special or sacred place because of something inherent within Jerusalem and Zion. It's much more to do with the fact that God chooses. God elects this place. This place that actually doesn't, humanly speaking, have a huge amount going for it, except perhaps that it is the meeting point of many ways and paths. On the Holy Mount stands the city God founded. Zion, glorious things are spoken of you, O city of God. And so the psalmist celebrates the city of God, and the psalmist celebrates the people of God. Except here we have, well, in the context of many of the Psalms, many of the Old Testament writings, we have a surprise, and yet it should not be a surprise to us. It shouldn't be a surprise to us if we've been reading the Old Testament carefully, and it certainly shouldn't be a surprise to us if we know the teachings and the life and ministry of Jesus. Because the people of God are demonstrated to be the peoples of God. That the amazing thing of Psalm 87 is that as it celebrates Zion as the city of God, so it celebrates the diversity of the people of God. This idea that God's people are not simply those who are born actually and physically in Jerusalem and in the surrounding area, but these are people from all over the world. Remember again that list that takes place in verse 4. Among those, so there are many others too, among those who know me, I mention Rahab and Babylon, Philistia too, and Tyre and Ethiopia. Well, Rahab, you might be familiar with as an Old Testament name. It's a mythical name. It speaks of, amongst other things, it speaks of a mythical chaos monster and becomes the name given by many to the land of Egypt. And then Babylon is mentioned next. Egypt, Babylon, the two great nations, between which is found this tiny nation. The two great nations that the people of Israel have been exiled to. Remember the stories of Joseph and his family in the end of the book of Genesis, as all the family relocates to Egypt, and how that becomes then the great rescue plan of God in the book of Exodus, when 400 years later a Pharaoh who does not remember what has taken place is cruelly treating the people. And so the great Exodus takes place and people are delivered from Egypt. Egypt is that great place to the south that is seen as the enemy. And Babylon, the place to the north and the east. Babylon, the place that will be the ultimate place of exile in the 6th century BC. That time when so much of the scriptures are collected and written down and created. That time when so much of what is the identity of the people of God as Israel comes into being. Babylon is the place to which they are exiled. And so for the psalmist to write of these great empires of might, these empires of enmity, that they are among those whom God knows. And Philistia and Tyre and even Ethiopia, we're not quite sure of the meaning of that word, but it's clearly somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa. Ethiopia, Kush, Nubia, it's somewhere, roughly speaking, where we would today place Sudan or South Sudan or Ethiopia. It's almost in biblical terms the ends of the earth, the regions beyond. But in this list, you get the sense of God's people coming from all nations, even nations beyond. Because God's love is not as simple as a city and a people. But God is the universal God. God is the creator, redeemer, sustainer of all that is and ever will be. Singers and dancers alike say, all my springs are in you. All of life in God. Symbolized, yes, by the city of Zion for the psalmist in Psalm 87. Symbolized for us as Christians by those great evocations of heaven and the afterlife that we find in Revelation, at least Revelation 21. When we get that sense that this is not all that there is. But whatever it is we mean by what is yet to come, we know that it is a yet to come that is for all peoples, all nations, all ethnicities, all people created in the image and likeness of God. No first-class citizens and hangers-on. No, the right sort of people, and we'll tolerate the rest. But God's celebration of God's life in all and for all. All my springs are in you.